Hey guys, welcome back to Stop the Shunning. My name is Bethany. I am here today with Deanna. Deanna was born into the Jehovah's Witnesses. She was fifth generation witness. She was a regular pioneer for 20 years. And as she puts it, she was fully brainwashed in the religion for 38 years. Then disaster struck, and she was falsely accused of being an apostate, which we're going to talk about what an apostate is in the Jehovah's Witnesses and why that's so bad. And she ended up losing everything, including her children. So today she's talking with us from Ecuador. She's going to tell us her story of how she completely transformed her life, how she went from being penniless to creating her own paradise. So, welcome to the channel, Dina.
You. Thank you so much for having me. I will start out by saying I will probably laugh a lot and make this horrific story slightly humorous because humor is a fantastic healing tool and you can laugh or you can cry and it's better to laugh. So,
I tell
my family background. Yeah, I grew up in the religion. My dad and uncles and grandpa and there are some hardcore people. They're all elders and ministerial servants and Bethelites. And, the expectation was not, oh, are you ready? How's your relationship with Jehovah? It's the faster you get baptized. How come it wasn't even faster? So I was 10 when I got baptized. And immediately, I think you have to wait like 6 months or something, started regular pioneering, which back then meant 90 hours a month knocking on doors. So, how, might you ask, could an 11-year-old spend that much time homeschooled? So, I started pioneering at the age of 11 and I ended up switching to Spanish because we were in kind of a unique area and a lot of vacation homes. And so a lot of the English territory was, knocking on empty doors. And so I ended up switching to the Spanish congregation right about when I was 12. So actually, most of the time that I was actively in the religion was pretty much in Spanish. So, Stephen Lett taught my first pioneer school. That he wasn't governing body at the time. So that made it, I think, even a little bit weirder because the facial features and going out in service with him was just like, this guy is kind of strange.
if you were taught by Stephen Lett, you're entitled to compensation. I should just say that right now.
No kidding, right? Right? I mean,
Oh my gosh. Sorry.
such a weirdo, such a strange person. Anyway, so the expectations being a young woman, young lady, actually child at that point in the religion is, you have to marry a spiritual brother. That's like the only thing that you really have to look forward to. You can pioneer, you could do the full-time ministry, but other than that, the expectation is you have to marry somebody who's doing something in the religion, You have to find a good resume. You're looking for somebody who's got the right family, the right spiritual background, the right spiritual goals. And funny enough, for at least in my case, it wasn't even about compatibility or love. It was literally about, okay, who is going to be acceptable to my family because of my rich spiritual heritage. I can't tarnish our family reputation by marrying a loser. Or, I was in the Spanish congregation, so I know my family was concerned that, literally, God forbid, should I marry somebody that was undocumented or something like that. So, so they kind of found somebody for me. And it was a brother who was about 10 years older than I was. And he had the right family and he had the right background and he had the right goals. And yep, he checked all the boxes. And I was doing construction with my dad at the time, and so I showed up at the construction site, and this brother's there, and it's the two of us, and we're alone. And the first thing I think is, oh my gosh, my dad's gonna freak out. My dad's gonna freak out. And he's like, no, your dad knows because I've already talked to them. And I've already told them that I'd like to marry you. And so that's why we're here. And yeah, that look on your face, that was kind of like the look on my face. It was not like, hey, let's get to know each other. And, there was, for all practical purposes, it was pretty much an arranged marriage. And as the Jehovah's Witnesses arrangements go, it was pretty good. It looked great on paper. It looked, prominent family, both had the right spiritual goals and everything. So we got married I was 17 at the time. We waited for my 18th birthday and got married right after I turned 18. The courtship, I'm not even sure that really qualifies as courtship because you're not allowed to be alone in the religion. You're not allowed to, actually have any sort of conversations about anything. I mean, our date night consisted of studying the watchtower on my family's couch. And it was the ultimate of a assembly worthy courtship. No holding hands, no kissing. It was squeaky clean. And of course, I'm homeschooled, so I think, oh, that's because he's so spiritual, right? You were doing things Jehovah's way. And, so I thought that was normal. In retrospect, that was not even a little bit normal. And so we get married, and it was disaster from the wedding night, pretty much. And the innocence, the naiveness of being homeschooled and growing up in a cult where no sort of dating or courtship or anything like that. I mean, how do you even know what to expect? You know, you don't even know what's normal because you're so virgin in every sense of the word, emotionally, mentally, And so I didn't have any idea what was wrong. And so quickly thereafter, it was a day or two after, my sister-in-laws take me out for breakfast. And they're like, there's some things about our family you should know. And so they proceed to explain that there had been extreme, extreme abuse in the family, sexual abuse from the father, from the grandfather, who were prominent in the religion. And of course, I'm like, now you tell me, this would have been probably information that should have been on the resume as you're considering applications here. And their response was, well, we told his previous girlfriend and she broke it off. So we really thought he should marry you. And so we didn't tell you. And for anybody who doesn't understand how marriage works in the religion, man, once you are married, that is it. There is no divorce or, you're not getting out of it. Now it's forever. So here I am. I'm married to a person who on my honeymoon won't touch me with a 10-foot pole. And of course, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to think. And you also there's so much silence around sex, personal relationships. Who do you go to? Who do you go and say, hello, is this normal? What's
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say, you're a child.
exactly?
You're a child. And I, just putting aside like legal age, 18, 21, or, thinking in terms like that, because even at 21, you're still young. But
Yeah,
In the Jehovah's Witnesses, it is just, they don't set you up. They set a lot of young people up for failure, because you're not allowed to express physical or emotional, even emotional intimacy outside
yeah,
the bounds of marriage. So, you got these raging hormones. you're just developing naturally,
Hmm.
and they really distort natural developmental milestones by placing all this pressure and, like you said, having a lot of guilt and shame surrounding sex and not being look, Dina, there's families out there in the real world who say, okay, you had sex, you did something maybe that was irresponsible, or okay, it was a close call. Okay, what can we learn from this?
Exactly.
We still love you, but they set their child up for success down the line, to have a more realistic, reasonable view of sex and relationships. But in the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's just, oh, you got the hormones raging. Well, the only way to satisfy that is by marriage. And oh, you're 18. Oh, we're good. And does he, like you were saying, check all the boxes? And that's all that matters. All they care about is, like you said, the spiritual resume. And
Yeah.
it's to the detriment of these young Jehovah's Witness couples. So go ahead. So you were married, and then it turned out to be a disaster. What happened next?
Total disaster. But we had good resumes. So very quickly, we were given actually special permission to go do an international construction assignment in Mexico. I think at the time the rules were you had to be 21 and at least married for a year, and I was 18, and they let us go with only being married for 5 months. So we went to Bethel in Mexico doing construction work, which, this is a privilege. However, I would like to point out that that was absolutely 100% slave labor. We worked 6 days a week from 7 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. On top of that, so we only had one Saturday off a month. One Saturday off a month. And here, as a female, we are the weaker vessel. And so, even at certain times of the month where, you might not be feeling like doing construction work 55 hours a week, you were allowed one free day off a month. And on top of that, you're still required to go to, at that time, it was 3 meetings a week. So it was 2 meetings during the week and then one on Sunday, which Sunday's your only day off. So you're still going to the meeting on Sunday. You still have to go preaching. So you're one day off, you're going to a meeting and then you're preaching. And then because we're in Bethel, we have Monday night Bethel meeting too. The schedule was just absolutely grueling, grueling, grueling. No privacy. Pretty much the way that the accommodations worked is it was like a hotel room with, the dining facility. So it's not like you could even have like a normal marriage with your normal privacy or anything like that, which I think suited him just fine because during this time we were there for 6 months. He would still avoid me like the plague. He would go on Saturday night. He'd get off work on Saturday and he'd go camping with his guy friends, which I wasn't invited to. And you would think that maybe I would have saw that as some sort of indication of why he wasn't interested in his female partner. But yeah, I'm young and naive, and it's still not even clicking to me that perhaps the reason why he's not interested in a, fairly attractive 18-year-old wife is, not just because of his own abuse, but because maybe he just doesn't like women at all. And that wasn't something that I put together until probably about 10 years after the fact, actually. And one of the ways I put that together was because several of the guys that he would go out camping with ended up getting excommunicated, shunned, disfellowshipped because of homosexuality. And these are the people that he's spending the weekend with. So we were in Mexico for 6 months. By the time we come back to the States, we had been married almost a year, and all my dreams of a happy marriage are, not at all coming true. And we had to live with my in-laws when we came back. That was, so I'm living with the person who did the abuse and the controlling, women hating, mentality of my father-in-law is something that to this day I have never seen it to that extreme in anybody else. It was crazy. I mean, he would literally sit on the couch and say things like, you know, women are only good for one thing, and even at that, half the time they're not good enough. And here I would expect that perhaps my husband would defend me or something, but no, they would just laugh about how useless women were, except for the one thing that they're good for. Finally, I did go to the English elders and I said, you know, there's some things about this family that you should know. Me innocently thinking that, you know, nobody knows about these things because we're a clean organization, we're Jehovah's people, and this should not be happening. You know, I will also say too that I came from a good family. I came from a very loving family, very strict Jehovah's Witnesses, but there was no abuse of that type. And I honestly didn't even know that that even existed in Jehovah's people. So I go to the elders and I say, there's some stuff about this family you should know. And their response is, we know, we know. You know, they were, yep, they were, like I said, a prominent family. They had, you know, donated, they made large contributions. And because of that, we're just going to leave this in Joe's hands. That wasn't the kind of elder that my dad was. My dad was one of those clean them up, kick them out, you know, keep the organization clean kind of guys. And to have this level of abuse be just covered up was mind-boggling to me. So at this point, my family had moved to the Midwest. They had moved back to Colorado. And so I told my husband, I don't want to live here with my father-in-law. I'm going to go back to where my family is. You're more than welcome to come with me. So we moved back to Colorado. And when he was separated from his familiar environment, his mental abuse issues got significantly worse. Whereas the first year, it was mostly avoidance and neglect. When we moved, that's when he really started becoming unhinged, and I really started seeing the person that I was married to, which was abusive, manipulative, off the chain. The mental abuse that I was going through was absolutely, it became unbearable. I mean, I could go on forever about that, but we're just going to brief this up. So basically, in a nutshell, I needed to get out because I was going absolutely crazy. And of course, the only way you can get out of a marriage is with adultery. You know, this is another warped thing about the Jehovah's Witnesses too, because in a normal world, you just leave. You just leave. And you don't jump into another relationship because you're not healing. You need some time you should go to therapy in between relationships. But that's not what happens in Jehovah's Witnesses. The only way you can get a scriptural divorce is if you literally jump into bed with the next relationship. So that's what I did. I ended up finding somebody to get me out of the marriage and I got disfellowshipped, which to me felt like such a relief. You know, as horrible as this sounds too, the most endearing thing about this worldly guy was he held the door open for me. That is so stupid in retrospect, but when you're coming from such a warped relationship,
I was going to say when you're coming from something incredibly toxic, like, and you were so young, you were a baby. I know I'm sorry to keep saying that,
I was.
but to be in such a toxic relationship and they, like I said, the organization just generally speaking sets you up for failure, and you're trying
Mhm.
to navigate all of this, and then you're dealing with emotional and mental abuse and things like that. Something as simple as somebody being considerate and doing something so foreign for you, like holding open the door or something, saying a loving thing or a kind thing, it's just kind of like a shock to the system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you, for just a second, I'm sorry, can you back up a little bit and explain, in case somebody's tuning in for the first time and doesn't know what you're referring to, can you explain in a nutshell what disfellowshipping is and kind of the mindset of, because you and I get it, but the mindset of where you were as a young woman and why you felt motivated to do what you had to do to get out of this really crappy situation, what that meant, disfellowshipping.
Okay, so disfellowshipping is kind of like this one size fits all punishment. There is no the punishment fits the crime. In the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, you get the same punishment whether you smoked a cigarette, molested a child, committed adultery, or committed murder, or whatever the crime is. The punishment is cutting off from every human that you know within the religion, which means that in this case, in the case of a marriage, it is not okay just to say, I'm in a bad situation. There's domestic violence, there's abuse. For my mental sanity, for my mental health, I need to get a divorce. That's not allowed. That's not allowed. The only option is to sin. And then the punishment for the sin is you will now be cut off from your parents, your brothers and sisters, your grandparents, your aunts, uncles, your cousins, all your friends, all of those people that you spent 90 hours a month preaching with, that you're just like this with, they will no longer speak to you. If they see you in the grocery store, they're going to walk on by like you're dead. So, no matter what horrible situation you're in, they just went and made it 10 times worse by taking away all your support system, all of the structure that you've clung to your whole entire life. They they brainwash you into feeling that now you've not just sinned against your husband, you have sinned against God. You have broken a vow to God. So now you're like, I mean, your self-esteem is just completely 100% none left.
So you finally got out of your first marriage, and then what happened next?
I got pregnant. So here I am excommunicated for my entire family, and I find myself pregnant. And like I said, I had come from a good family. I couldn't imagine raising my child without grandparents and family and the only religion that I knew. At this point, like I said, I was still fully brainwashed. I had gone through a bad situation, but I wasn't questioning the religion. I was questioning the person that I married, not the religion. So I went through the steps to get what Jehovah's Witnesses call reinstated, which is to get back in the good graces of the religion. And what that pretty much consists of, it means going to 3 meetings a week, sitting in the back row, and no one speaking to you like again, like you're dead. I go through that process. It took about a year, and so I have my little baby. The other thing too, talking about women and how this organization completely affects the decisions that you make. As I am trying to get back into the religion, the rules are I am either going to have to be celibate, which, at the ripe old age of 21 is going to be kind of difficult. The the religion is always looking at your resume, and now my resume is tainted because I've been excommunicated, I've been shunned, and now I have a baby. My odds in the religion aren't very good. And then you know what? This is the baby's dad too. So the chances of not getting disfellowshipped again because you have sex with the baby's daddy is not very good. So I marry this guy. We had not known each other very long, and I did it to follow the rules of the religion. So here I am married to an unbeliever, and as you're making these decisions in the religion, when you're making these decisions because of the religion, you are making the best decision out of really crappy choices. So obviously, in retrospect, this was a horrible choice, but it's the choice that's put in front of you because you're in a cult. You're in a cult. It was doomed from the beginning. He didn't sign up to have a Jehovah's Witness wife that doesn't celebrate Christmas and doesn't celebrate birthdays and goes to meetings 3 times a week. He didn't sign up for that. And it was doomed. Like I said, that marriage was pretty much doomed from the very beginning. It ended up lasting 5 years, about 5 years. And in that 5 years, we had three kids. And after that, he ended up leaving. He did the ultimatum, choose your God or me. So here I am at the ripe age of 27, um, divorced twice with three little kids. Now I'm really untouchable. Your reputation is everything in this religion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about image and reputation in the organization. And it has nothing to do with the facts of the situation, the circumstances surrounding things, and how you got to where you're at. They just care about you following the rules and looking a certain way. Yep.
Exactly, exactly. So, you're in this religion, your whole heart is in the religion, and it's not about how much you love God. It's not about how faithful you are. It's about how it looks. And so here comes marriage number three. Somebody was willing to marry me with my tarnished reputation, two marriages, reinstated, three little kids. An elder comes along, 20 years older than me, and he could use a wife. So remember in the beginning, I jokingly talk about somebody's resume. Well, an elder is a big box on the resume, right? It's somebody who's a leader in the religion. It's somebody who has the status. It's somebody who's spiritually strong, a spiritual head, which, of course, for a young woman who's raising three little kids, that's something that's going to be important. You don't want somebody who's half-hearted in the religion because you want somebody who's going to give a good example, who's going to do a family study, who's going to pray with the kids, who's going to support raising the kids in the religion.
They model that for the congregation, and then you're supposed to do that at home. You know,
Exactly.
they shepherd the flock. They look after the congregation, and so they're supposed to translate that type of care and attention to the congregation to their families. But we know, Dina, that that's not always the case.
You are still very, very, very sheltered as to what really life is like. The other thing that is beaten into you too is that marriage is not between two individuals. Marriage is a threefold cord. And that as long as you have God, as long as you are putting spiritual things first, everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be fine. You can marry a total stranger. And as long as you have this threefold cord and you're a submissive wife, it's going to work. That's the mentality that you have beaten into your head that spiritual person, and God, it is absolutely 100% going to work. Wrong. Anyway, we date for 5 months and we get married. So basically, again, I'm marrying pretty much a total stranger. Even though I'm now older, we're still not alone together. He was 20 years older than me. So I get married. I take my three small little kids and we move from Colorado to Utah. And he's an alcoholic. He's an alcoholic. These Jehovah's Witnesses marriages too, it is like having ice water thrown in your face on the day you get married. The day you get married and the day you sign on the dotted line and the day it's too late, you just found out who you actually committed to spending the rest of your life with. I have jokingly said many times that had I slept with those husbands before I married them, I never would have married them. But, here I am. I've got three small kids, married the third time. I can't get divorced again for crying out loud. So no matter how bad it is, I've got to stick it out.
I'm so sorry, Dina. I don't know if you ever watched Friends, but I'm sorry. This reminds me of like the episode with Ross where he's like, no divorces in '99.
But totally true. Totally
Yeah,
true.
you gotta laugh or else you cry sometimes with stuff. Like
Exactly.
you've been through the ringer, and it's like,
He's drinking shots of alcohol before parts to steady his nerves.
It makes me also think of just how alcoholism is rampant in the organization. In all seriousness, it is a problem because you can't have sex before marriage. Okay, no premarital sex, no smoking. You know, the Jehovah's Witnesses have nothing to do except there's this loophole, the alcohol loophole.
Exactly.
Have a lot of people, and even if I'm not a I don't mean to get into like therapy territory, but it's like even if you're dealing with a good person who just doesn't know how to has no other coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms, they might turn to alcohol because that's like the one thing that that can numb their pain or whatever issues they're going through, or they drink and then they harm the people in their vicinity, their family members, their wives, their spousal abuse and all that kind of thing. And there's but that is a yes, alcoholism is rampant throughout the Jehovah's Witnesses organization.
It is their only coping mechanism, and there are many, many, many contributing factors. One of the contributing factor is the grueling schedule of having to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, if you're a halfway mediocre Jehovah Witness, you're probably spending at least 10 to 15 hours a week in the religion. If you're a decent one, it's probably more like 20 to 25. And by this time, I was back to regular pioneering, which means I'm spending 90 hours a month. So right there, that's, 22 hours a week preaching on top of all of the Bible meetings and the preparation for those Bible meetings and all of that. There's no self-fulfillment. There is no encouragement to have any sort of hobby, to find your identity, to discover who you are. Everything is grueling self-sacrifice. There's constantly this feeling that you're not doing enough, that you should do more, that you should do more. And that leads to a lot of times depression because you have no identity. Even in the religion, they say put on the new personality, which basically means you have no personality. You are a watchtower drone. And because of this lack of identity, they'll drown it in alcohol because it makes the pain go away. Or in later on, he gets into prescription painkillers and and alcohol. And that's I know that's why it's so rampant, is because it's their escape.
Your entire life and identity has to center on being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I've said this ad nauseum on my channel. People have heard this a million times. It's not just church on Sundays, which is
Exactly.
fine. If you want to just go to, I don't care if you just go to church on Sunday, but like this is not just, I get spiritual fulfillment once a week. I walk in and I walk out. Being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I hope so far people listening to this can see that there's always going to be in every denomination or organization, there's going to be more flaky people, I guess, for or whatever, or people who put in the bare minimum. But this organization can really just take your blood, and you have to just your
100%.
entire life is just consumed, even at just like the basic level. If you're just like kind of even when you're kind of coasting, you're still your whole life is taken up with meetings and preaching and looking a certain way. So, all right, so
100% from what you're wearing. I mean, it consumes all of your thoughts, completely consumes all of your thoughts. So the only good thing that really came out of this marriage was this is where I was really introduced to psychology. We were living in Utah, and we had a life coaching business, which a lot was centered around business coaching, real estate sales coaching. But sales coaching, when you're not meeting your sales goals, is almost always because you have personal problems, there's personal issues. And so my clients would come to me and they would say, you probably don't understand this because I'm in Utah. You probably don't understand this, but we've been excommunicated. They were Mormon. All my clients were Mormon. And so they were like, you probably don't understand this, but we've left our religion. My family's not talking to us. We've lost our identity because we don't believe the same. The beliefs are very different, but Mormons are our sister religion, man. The similarities are off the chain. So I had been disfellowshipped and reinstated. And so they would come to me and they're like, you probably won't understand this. I'm like, ha, Funny enough, I do. Funny enough, I do know what it's like to be kicked out of your religion and to be shunned. And, I do know what that's like. So I didn't really focus on the religious aspect. I didn't need to because they had already left their religion. So I used the life coaching to help them restructure their life outside of the Mormon cult. Who is your identity now? What is your identity now? What is your future? How do you deal with shunning? How do you integrate into the world? Because they consider us the world too. The lifestyle, the lifestyle things that they have, their dress, caffeine, all these other details that now they're being faced with, how do I integrate? I created this whole program that was for helping Mormons integrate into the world. Ironically enough, never even realizing that I too was in a cult, definitely never realizing that I was going to need these skills for myself at some point. At this point, I'm still regular pioneering, and I suppose there was kind of a little bit of a conflict of interest. My secret heart was kind of like, oh, maybe Jehovah's going to call them because they've left their religion. So I became very, very, very familiar with the Mormon religion. And you would think that maybe I would have connected some of the similarities, but no. This is why I say I was completely 100% still brainwashed.
What's it called? This really good documentary, and I'm sure somebody out there's probably seen it too. Maybe you've seen it too. Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief. And I remember watching that. I'm thinking, oh man, what a weird cult. Yeah, this is so bizarre. And then I like twitching because I'm like, wait a minute, this sort of sounds like this sounds familiar. This sounds familiar, and I've joked about that too, that before I found out that the Jehovah's Witnesses were in fact legitimately a cult, they fit the definition of a cult. I looked up Stephen Hassan and the bite model and all that, and hit all the bullet points and checked all the boxes. But before I, did that, you think, oh, that fits other cults. We're not a cult. So I
Yeah.
find that interesting that to circle back around the fact that you were doing that for Mormons or ex-Mormons in Utah. So go from there. So what happened next? You're helping these Mormons, move on with their life, but it's not quite clicking for you. So when did that change?
Actually, you know what? It took another 10 years. It took another 10 years for that to click with me. What ended up happening was we decided that we were going to go serve where the need was great and move to the Dominican Republic. I had always wanted to do the missionary kind of work, which in the Jehovah's Witness religion, you cannot do if you're a woman. The only way you can do it as a woman is if you have a husband who's willing to do it, and you don't officially get that title, especially if you have kids. So this is kind of like the unofficial way to be a missionary. I had wanted my kids to have an experience living outside of the United States. So it seems like it's going to be great, right? I think this was like about 2010. We moved to the Dominican Republic. Um, my kids all were bilingual. They became trilingual. We were in a Haitian Creole congregation. And this is where the third marriage really starts going downhill. He had a fall, dislocated his shoulder, and that's where he got pain pills. And then between the alcohol and the pain pills, now we've got serious, serious domestic violence in the house. I'm doing my best just to just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just, keep us out in service. I feel like, for being in the cult, we had as good of a life as possible, active with other Jehovah's Witnesses that were there. We had a big house, we had a really great social life, looked really good on the surface. Not on the surface, though. The marriage there was no marriage. He was intoxicated a significant portion of the week. He's on pain medications. Finally, it gets to the point where, yeah, I have bruises. And in these small communities of need graders is what we call them, we all know each other. We're all preaching with each other 90, 100 hours a month. And, it's not so easy to hide those problems. A lot of times people kind of glaze over it and don't really focus on it that much until it gets to the point where you can't keep your eyes closed. And then finally at one point, a brother comes to me and he says, there's only so many times you can say a motorcycle helmet hit you in the face, and that's why you have a black eye. I've seen, I know what's going on. You need to say something. You need to say something about this. And of course, I'm fully indoctrinated, and so I'm convinced that this is Jehovah's way. He wants to keep the congregation clean. And as much as I would like to keep everything quiet, the truth is, I know that this is wrong. I know that how could Jehovah give his blessing on the family when the family head is an alcoholic and there's domestic violence? In the back of my head, I'm concerned about the kids because the kids are watching. The kids have to see this too. They have to see what's happening to their mother, And so I want them to be trained by my example that sometimes we have to do the right thing, even if it's hard. So I go and I talk to the brothers. I turn him in. I rat him out that, not only is there alcohol, but there's the domestic violence. They call a committee meeting. They haul him in, and he gets all of his privileges removed. He's publicly reproved. They did not disfellowship him. Funny enough, there's a little loophole that a few elders are aware of. If the person that's under scrutiny, if there's a chance that they might be suicidal, they will not disfellowship them. So he pulled the I'm going to commit suicide card if I get disfellowshipped. And so they did not disfellowship him. They publicly reproved him, but he was not disfellowshipped because of this little loophole. So it's announced he's publicly reproved. He's no longer an elder. I think it was about 3 or 4 days later, 3 or 4 days after that. He clears out the bank accounts and abandons me and the 3 kids. He goes back to our home congregation and leaves me and 3 kids in the Dominican Republic penniless. No job, no money. I had wanted to stay in the Dominican Republic. It's less expensive. It was stability for the kids, but financially, I literally couldn't. I mean, I had to go back to the States to reset myself financially. My idea was go back 6 months, 8 months, get myself financially on my feet. And then I had intended on going back with the kids because, like I said, they had their friends there and, I could provide a better lifestyle with them for sure. The kids' biological dad, the one who is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses, in those 10 years, he had not paid child support and he had seen the kids 2 or 3 times in 10 years. Okay. They were raised by the stepdad. So that's an important detail. I go back to the States and I was there for probably about 2 or 3 months. I was starting to work. I was getting back on my feet when their biological dad calls and he says, I want to see the kids. Technically, he had legal visitation. So I couldn't really say no. I say, okay, he was only going to take them for a week. He picks them up and then he takes the kids and then he calls me and he says, you're never going to see them again. This is a disaster. My life is in a total disaster. And here I am thinking, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing everything the Bible's way. I'm doing everything Jehovah's way. Everything is a total disaster. I went to the elders and reported the third husband because that's the right thing to do. And one of the consequences of doing the right thing is he wipes me out financially. I'm in this total disaster. Okay, so the third husband, the one who had left us in the Dominican Republic, the kids' stepdad, he had gone back to our home congregation. And he had been in the home congregation for about 4 or 5 months before I came back to the States. And I did not go back to the home congregation. I actually ended up in California where friends were. And the whole time he's in the home congregation and he's telling everybody the reason why he left me is because I'm an apostate. I don't know this yet. I didn't know this yet. So I show up in the home congregation to start the custody battle that I'm now in, thinking, okay, this is my home congregation. This is where my family is. I can at least couch surf or something while I'm doing custody. And I totally, totally get the shun treatment across the board.
And you don't know why. You
I
don't know
have no idea
at this
why.
point. Okay. Can you tell people what an apostate is?
It is the worst label that you can possibly get. It means you have denied God. It means that you have cursed God. It is the unforgivable sin in Jehovah's Witnesses' eyes.
When really, it just means somebody who woke up and realized this isn't the truth, this is a cult, and I just want to move on and live my life in peace. You're still labeled an apostate. An
Right.
apostate is like you're deader than dead. Just to give,
It's worse than being shunned.
it's worse than being shunned. There's no hope for you if you're apostate.
Exactly.
And so,
Exactly.
so people, I want people to understand the gravity of that, of what an apostate is, and you don't even realize what's going on. Sorry. So
Exactly. Exactly. I have no idea why everybody is treating me like I freaking have the plague. Okay, so the reason why they treat you so horribly, if you do something like you're disfellowshipped, they shun you because you smoke a cigarette or something like that. That's a sin. But the sin of apostasy is more, they call you mentally diseased. So literally, if you're disfellowshipped because you smoked, you're probably not going to convince somebody else to smoke. But when they label you as an apostate, they are terrified of any word that comes out of your mouth because you might sway somebody else to also leave. So the shunning of this label apostate is like leagues beyond just being disfellowshipped, right? So I'm like, what the heck? Also, in the meantime, this also begins to explain to me why my family is acting so weird. Hello, domestic violence here. I just got abandoned. Me and the kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews. Where's my family? Where's my family support? It was because the ex was there telling them your daughter's an apostate. Your niece is an apostate. Your niece has denied the religion that we all belong to. So I'm not getting any sort of, the advice that I'm getting from my family is you need to do things Jehovah's way. You need to work on your relationship with Jehovah. You need to make things right with your spiritual head, which of course is not really making tons of sense to me until after the fact when I realize, oh my God, you guys think I'm an apostate, which I totally wasn't. I was not, I wasn't doubting the religion, not even a little bit. I'm still trying to do everything by the rules.
that's why what he did is so horrible.
Evil.
You're not even
So
you're not
evil.
even technically you're not even technically an apostate at this point. That's the
Nothing.
part, I'm sorry, Gina, that's the part that's blowing my mind is that that was very strategic.
Oh, he's good. He was good.
That's very strategic.
Well, he'd been an elder for 20 plus years. His father was a circuit overseer. They knew how to work the system. They totally knew how to work the system. So, for those of you that don't know either, when a Jehovah's Witness moves from one congregation to the next congregation, there's a letter that this congregation sends to this congregation. And you don't know what the letter says. You can probably guess for the most part, but it's basically this congregation telling you this person is this, blah, 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 blah. So when this third husband left the Dominican Republic, obviously I didn't read his letter, but his letter would have said something along the lines of he just got removed as an elder for domestic violence. He's been publicly reproved. He's got restrictions. That's what his letter would have said. something along those lines, to let the new congregation know what they're dealing with here, except that my father-in-law was a circuit overseer. So instead of having the letter go to the actual congregation where we belonged, they did some fancy work and they sent it to his buddies, my father-in-law's buddies over in this congregation, to basically kind of intercept the letter so that they could rewrite it in a way that says, yeah, this guy's fine. So my congregation didn't get the real letter that says he just got reproved for domestic violence. They got the cleaned up version that says, yeah, this guy's fine. And so when they say, hey, where's your wife? Your letter says you're fine. And then he has total freedom to say, I left her because she's an apostate. She's an enemy of God. Brilliant, actually. Actually, it was a brilliant move. Very good. Well played, buddy.
So, what happens with your kids at this point? Where are your kids?
So now I have a cross-country custody battle. The kids' dad has the children in Florida. The custody orders are out of Colorado. I'm in California. Technically, when he picked them up from the airport, it was the Nevada airport. So we literally have coast to coast battle here. I try to get legal advice and they're like, sorry, lady, you're totally screwed. I mean, they wanted like $30,000 retainer fees just because of the logistical complication of everything. So I took my custody orders because I had custody of the kids. I was the custodial parent. And I take those to the police in Florida. I say, here's my custody orders. They look at me and say, this is a Colorado order. You are not a resident of Florida. We can't enforce this. And that's when the jurisdictional nightmare starts pinging back and forth and pinging back and forth. And so I'm trying to be in Florida where the kids are, and every couple weeks I'm having to go back to Colorado either for a custody hearing, something with the custody of the kids. By this time, the third husband had filed for divorce. So I've got divorce and the custody battle going on. And my life is just like, and I'm still trying to be faithful to the religion. I'm still thinking if I do things right, Jehovah's going to give me the kids back.
That's really what I was thinking is the mindset of how you're set up from a young age. You're set up from a young age. You're on this path. You're only doing what you know to be the right thing to do. You're going through all of these challenges and this hellscape through all these different life obstacles. And this entire time, what I'm trying to spit out is this entire time, am I still doing right by Jehovah?
Exactly.
The indoctrination people really need to understand this is not just a case of just leave. It's the indoctrination is so strong that despite everything that you're going through, this is woven through. It just stays with you. So what was the moment you're going through this, what sounds like an absolute custodial hellscape, 3 divorces, survivor of domestic violence? What was the final thing? When did you finally officially wake up and get out of all this?
So I ended up not getting custody of the kids. I ended up losing custody of the kids. Ironically enough, the religion was a huge part of that. Oh, she raised them in a cult. I can't even necessarily say that I blamed the court for that. But you know what? At the same time, the religion does say, hey, if religion is an issue in a custody battle, we'll help you with legal help, unless you're an apostate. So there was nothing from the religion, no help whatsoever from the religion. I'm going through a divorce. I'm still trying to hang on because I'm thinking, maybe someday I'm going to get my kids back, blah, blah, blah. But I was booted out so hard out of the religion. One of the last, right there towards the end, this was probably the final breaking point. I was in Florida, and I don't know where my publisher record card was because it was still kind of floating around the United States. It hadn't really caught up with me yet. So I'm in this congregation in Florida, and I was explaining to one of the brothers my situation. And, in my mind, I'm still a regular pioneer. Probably not technically because my letter is still floating around, but it's not like I didn't like I stepped down or anything like that. In my heart, I'm still a pioneer. This all happens super fast. And so he says, "We're doing unassigned territory." He says, "Come with us. Come do unassigned territory with us." So, unassigned territory is there are rural areas in the United States that don't get preached to very often, maybe once or twice every couple years or something like that. So, the Jehovah's Witnesses will send a group in and dedicate, 8 hours a day to talking to rural communities. It's like mini missionary work within the United States. That's kind of the best description. So I go with them, and it really felt like a blessing. It felt like, ah, this is what I love. I love people. I love talking to people. I love helping people. This has been my whole life. At this aside from the freaking drama central, my whole life was talking to people and helping people and consoling people, and it was really a week where I really felt like, maybe Jehovah is helping me. He is throwing me a blessing or something. So I get back, and immediately there's two elders knocking on my door. And they say, "What have you done? You didn't qualify for that. That's an act of rebellion. Your husband called us, and your spiritual head says that you're an apostate. And you just did this privilege of unassigned territory, and you're an apostate. This is like the Jezebel spirit." And they just ream me. And I just burst into tears. I'm like, all I did was go out in service, which is what I love doing. And they're like, we've talked to your spiritual head and we know you're an apostate. I'm like, I'm not. I'm not, really, I'm not. And they're like, nope, nope, nope. You're nothing now. I went to one meeting after that, and I grabbed a broom to sweep the bathroom and clean the bathroom. And they were all over me. They said, "No, you don't understand. You get nothing. You have no privileges. You don't get to answer. You can't talk to anybody. Your spiritual head says you're an apostate." And that was it. That was the nail. That was pretty much the nail in my coffin, because there's no defense against being labeled as that.
What's so wild to me is you are literally not an apostate, and
I know.
you're not an apostate, and you're desperately trying to convince them that you're not an apostate. It's not even like, oh, I've been sneaking stuff in, I've been saying things on the internet or
Not
whatever.
at all.
And oh, I'm not an apostate. You're literally not an
I'm
apostate.
literally not an apostate.
That's wild. So finally, you are done. You're an apostate. You can't change their mind.
Yeah,
So
so I'm like, there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me, because I should not have to try this hard to stay into the religion. God must see something in me that he doesn't like. And I'm just going to have to accept this. And I'm just going to have to, maybe Jehovah just doesn't want me. And so that's when I pulled out what I had done with the Mormons. And I started restructuring my life in the world. And I did not wake up. I was not woken up. I was restructuring. Okay, how do I make worldly friends? What's my new identity? What goals am I going to go for? How do I restructure myself financially? What are my beliefs about money? What are my beliefs about my capabilities? How do I live as wonderfully as possible until Jehovah destroys me at Armageddon and all the true religion lives and I don't? Because I didn't wake up yet. So I did the lifestyle reprogramming, because in my mind there's like two levels of deprogramming that you have to do. You have to do religious deprogramming, which normal people do first. Then you do the lifestyle reprogramming. I did the lifestyle reprogramming first, and it took me 2 years before I finally read Crisis of Conscience. And
Ah,
I was like, shit, I grew up in a cult.
yeah,
That's when the transformation was complete.
I call I call it the oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you can go through so much drama, you can go through so many horrible things, and still it doesn't click. And then you have an oh shit moment where the oh shit moment is like, oh shit, I'm in a cult. That's
Yeah.
my to my point. Just, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that. So
So
it
then,
finally hit you. Crisis of conscience. I mean, that's just seminal work. That's
right, right. So my lifestyle restructuring, this restructuring process was intense because I had, when I was working with the ex-Mormons, 10 years prior, my what I would teach them is you need to be on a rocket ship to heal. You need to be on a rocket ship to integration. You need expedited therapy. You need lightning fast recovery because you just lost 38 years, 48 years. You can't take decades to heal. You need to catch up. I would literally sit with myself and I honestly I consider the third marriage, the psychology, the learning the neuro-linguistic programming literally was the biggest blessing of my life. Because if I hadn't had those coaching skills, I don't know if I would be alive to even tell the story because it was so devastating, When a person realizes they're in a cult and they purposely distance themselves, you expect the shunning. You deserve the shunning. You get it. You totally get it. But it was that I didn't do that. I didn't deserve that. I hadn't committed the crime for that punishment. I hadn't done that. So I needed some serious, serious, serious reprogramming. I would sit and I would coach myself. I'm not even kidding. 6 and 8 hours a day. It was intensive. Okay, I'd sit in the chair as the client, and I'd be like, and I'd write down what the thoughts were. I'd stand up, shake it off. I'd sit in the coach chair and say, okay, this is what you said. Let's recognize that this is not accurate, and I had to work through all of that myself. And it worked. It allowed me to get back on my feet financially. It allowed me to get a career. It allowed me to heal. The emotions that you go through when you've left the religion, there's anger, there's resentment, there's fury, there's this sense of injustice. You cannot thrive as long as your body is full of those emotions. So the faster you can process the anger and the resentment and let it go, it gives you that space so that you can thrive. There's the senses of abandonment, then you get the whole gaslighting. Oh my God, how did I not see it? You can kind of even go through these phases where you're angry at yourself for not waking up sooner, or I raised my kids in a cult, and part of the reason why it went down the way that it did is because I raised my kids in a cult. I had to work through my own feelings of responsibility for that. The fact that I gave them the same upbringing that I had, basically. And those realizations and healing those realizations, forgiving yourself, forgiving my family for being in a cult. They behaved the way a cult is trained to behave. They didn't get therapy. They didn't wake up. They're doing exactly as they've been brainwashed to do. So going through that process of being able to let go of all of that is what gives you the clean space to be able to create a real life, to be able to create the life that really matters, to make up for the lost years that we dedicated to full-time service.
yeah. Dina, you've been through the absolute ringer and you've developed amazing resilience. And I'm just, yeah, absolutely in awe. So you went through this process, you deconstructed, you worked on healing, which is an extremely difficult process when you're leaving, like you said, a cult, but the Jehovah's Witnesses we're talking about specifically. So do you have any closing thoughts or remarks for anybody who might have experienced something very similar to your story, or just in general, advice in general to maybe a current Jehovah's Witness who's watching this, or to former Jehovah's Witnesses who are still grappling with guilt and shame and their programming?
First of all, I would say that I think every human alive could use therapy. Just because it's a way to help you emotionally grow. And coming from a cult background, any sort of self-help, any sort of self-realization is looked down upon as demonic. So I would say that my best piece of advice is absolutely get therapy. Invest in yourself, invest in your healing. I know that a lot of times coming out of the religion, that's an idea that's kind of foreign to us. But these are very difficult things that are almost impossible to process on your own. You need somebody to help you process. Your healing will be so much faster if you can talk to somebody about it. So my first would bit of advice would be definitely get some help. You're not alone, so don't act like it. Don't act like it. And the other thing too is you might be in this limbo world where you're not fully in the world, but you're not fully in the religion. You're in this limbo world. And maybe you're afraid of stepping fully out, getting fully into the world. But I have so many stories of beautiful, beautiful, wonderful people that I have met outside of the religion. And I will tell you that being completely freaking brainwashed for 38 years, I had no idea what the world really was. I had this, dragons and horrible, that the world is full of drug addicts and heroin users and we're all gutter people and that is so not what life is. Life is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful on the outside. And I don't care how old you are or how little education you have or how much trauma you've been through, you can create a wonderful life for yourself on the outside. I promise.
Dina, thank you so much for being on the channel today and for sharing your incredible story of resilience and how you overcame just insane challenges and survivor of domestic abuse, and that you're living your life with joy and purpose, intention, and that you're doing so much better now. I'm so happy for you. I know that a lot of people who are watching this are going to be happy for you that you're finally in a good place and that you're away from all the craziness and the indoctrination now. If you enjoyed this interview, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps the channel grow. I will leave a link to Dina's channel in the bio below. Thank you everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. And thank you again, Dina, for being on Stop the Shunning.
Mwah.
Bye. See ya.